Good morning and welcome to the TechSpark Coffee Morning. This is Coffee Morning number 6 from lockdown. So I think everybody's very settled in and hopefully knows, it sounds like from the chat, knows what coffees and teas they prefer now for these mornings. I'm delighted that this morning we're going to be having a really interesting conversation with Nick Dean, who I've got with me. We're going to be talking about talent and the future of work. So I won't steal Nick's thunder. I'll ask him in a minute to introduce himself. But Nick's got literally decades of experience in this, and he's been doing some thinking about the immediate implications that we've all seen, but also where this will have implications in the longer term. So it should be a really interesting conversation. As always, please add questions into the chat on the right-hand side as we go. And I will ask those towards the end. And that's pretty much it from me for now. So I will, Nick, it'd be great if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a bit more about your background.
Sure. So effectively work across 3 businesses as it stands. We've got ADLIB, which is what I'd class as the dark side, which is effectively a recruitment business. Traditionally, people will know us for kind of tech, data, marketing and design. Fantastically and good timing, just before this, we'd invested into somebody very senior in the market whose background is all engineering and science, which from a diversification point of view was brilliant timing and is proving in these really difficult times that it was great. So we've got a real focus coming out of this and at the moment in things like biotech and, like I say, science itself, which is great. And that's kind of pushing beyond the Southwest as well. And we've also kind of invested into a couple of seniors recently who are doing a really good job, kind of London outside of the Southwest. But overall, we have kind of close to 40 people. The other big thing on ADLIB is that we're the only BCorp in the UK of our kind. So we do have a real focus on balancing profit and purpose, which we can come through kind of during the discussion. The lighter side, the other or another company we have is Tech Talent Academy, which effectively vision is that we'll train 20,000 people from diverse backgrounds into tech, data and cyber. We're based in Bristol and the Midlands. The difference between ADLIB and TTA right now is massive. ADLIB, again, we'll talk probably a little bit on, is kind of about 30% capacity to what it would be ordinarily. Whereas TTA is absolutely going through the roof. We've just launched a huge project with West Midlands Combined Authority to deliver training to 200 women or non-binary folk in data and full stack development. And we've got proposals coming out of our ears. So again, that's very relevant to this conversation. And then finally, we've got Enable, which is another dark side recruitment business, which all focuses in business development and sales, with a majority within the tech space. Cool.
And across those businesses, you're working with lots and lots and lots of other businesses, and you have done for a long time. We work very closely with ADLIB, so I know you're doing some great stuff, and we're starting to do much more with Tech Talent Academy as well. So sort of in the immediate term, with those businesses that you are still working with, how have you seen a change in working patterns? Are people getting used to it now? Is it starting to happen? Are we, 6 weeks in? Are people coming to terms with it?
Yeah, I think we work across so many sectors, from kind of startups, SMEs, right through to kind of large scale corporates. And there's a number of patterns which you've seen in those organizations. I mean, my instinct in terms of how things will respond kind of over the coming months, and as I say, none of us know what's going on, so it is instinct, is that the kind of that 30% that we're still operating with have good reason to continue operating. They might be not-for-profits or in sectors which are resilient to the situation that's going on, and their initial challenge might have been, how do we effectively set people up to work from home? And that once that hurdle was overcome, they could keep going again. And then I think you've got a middle pocket, which is, I think we kind of fit into, which was, you've got that initial hurdle of how do we get everyone set up working from home? But they were ready to take people on. They knew what their model was. and there's a big practical issue now about onboarding, getting people in, getting them effectively up and running and communicating within the business. Ironically, we've had a couple of people that we'd offered and have started, which is really quite bizarre, having people start that you can't physically go and see and meet and onboard as well as you'd like to. And then finally, you've got the pots of clients where they just don't know what their future is because the cash flow is gone. You know, they're effectively their clients, or their model is no longer fit for purpose under the world it is, and it's about how long they can survive. So I think the next round will be that hopefully we'll see that middle bank of 30% come back, and that will then fuel the next stage. But I think it's a very long game. But coming back to like the question that you asked, in terms of people working effectively and how that is from home, I think there's a number of benefits that people are finding, and I went through that initial kind of challenge of practicality. I know we had it with our ops manager, which was, you know, a weekend, 2-3 days of sheer panic, and working at incredible pace. But I think, you know, one thing that we did is that we got tools and systems set up, as many people did, that just weren't on the radar with a matter of hours and days, and that were very quickly adopted. And I think under normal circumstances, they would take a lot longer. We had a great example of that because we moved from Gmail to 365 earlier on in the year, moving to Teams for a little while, and we were resilient because of the systems that we'd got in place, whereas effectively we did it in 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, and by Monday afternoon everybody was loving it. We could have done it the whole time, but it gave us that confidence to do it. So I think generally a lot of people have now set up and structured to kind of work from home and enjoy the benefits of remote working. I think a big benefit from this will be, and we have this as well, is that there is access to a huge amount of data as to the success from working remotely. And certainly en masse, I appreciate people might have had policies in place before, but we're talking a forced situation here, which is the difference, rather than a voluntary situation. So people have made themselves very productive and accountable very quickly, and worked out how to achieve the objectives of their role, as opposed to maybe just trying to figure it out, which is, I think, a different approach. So I think the way that data is utilised is really valuable, of improving what happens from here. I had a really interesting point which was given to me, which was around reduced commute and meeting time. And I think we've got an interesting situation with this. So I think there's something out there which says that the majority of people have probably reduced or kind of increased their day by about 30 minutes to 4 hours, based on either not commuting or unnecessary meetings or distraction, which actually is a significant amount of time which comes into work-life balance, well-being, mental health, or even space just to even think. You know, we've got, our situation at the moment is that we've retained a lot of the seniors within the business because they're best placed to turn the market that they can, and have the right level of conversations. And we really are backs against the wall. You know, people are working hard many hours a day, but we have a conversation to explain this gain of a couple of hours a day. And actually, if they can, we're not going to come back to what we were before. We already know that, and that's a good thing in many ways, because again, we'll get to it, but there's huge benefit in reflecting on what we were and what we will be. But actually purposely setting aside 30 minutes to think long-term rather than this firefighting short-term will generate a lot of knowledge and thought process for where we are going to head into. So that's a real value. And then I think in line with that as well, just unnecessary travel, the amount of times people will go, and there's a need for face-to-face, don't get me wrong, obviously there is. But traveling to London or client meetings or to take briefs or whatever, I think the confidence now, even doing this, I spent many years pretending my Skype didn't work because I feel really uncomfortable. People suss me out now because I'm actually okay with it. But actually that reduced time, not only from a productivity point of view and increasing work-life balance where you're not sat in a car or on a train, is incredibly good for the environment, which, you know, does play back for us onto the BCorp side as well. And I think that's something that we really have to take notice of. So I think from a benefits point of view, those are the significant things we've seen from clients.
Yeah, and I think we've absolutely seen that with the organisations we're working with. And there are, you know, talking to that, people using Skype and using video calls, there's lots of people who wouldn't necessarily be keen to carve out time on a Thursday morning and sit in front of an audience of people talking to me about what they're doing. So this has actually worked really well for us. There's lots of it's less nerve-wracking to not be able to see an audience glaring at you.
Yeah.
So no, it's all good. And I guess sort of related to that, are there things that you as a manager are using there to sort of take advantage of that additional time and not having to do travel? Are you seeing increased productivity? Are people doing the additional hours, or what? How are you seeing that?
I think that, I mean, it's a really tough market for us on the recruitment side at the moment, as it is for many people in many sectors. So I think there's a huge change in terms of accountability. I know the people in ADLIB will roll their eyes if I said that I have kind of been banging on for the last couple of years that, are we fit for a recession? Because wanting to say this the right way, it can be too easy in terms of your skill set, because it's very natural to hone to the things which you enjoy doing, and shy away from the things that you might not need to. And I think that, you know, as I think those that kind of went through 2008 do, when you've gone through something like this, you do come out much more rounded and focused in what you need to do when you need to dig deep. So I think, again, there will be a positive from that. So I think we've seen that. I think the thing that we will take to it for the longer term, though, is something which well, as people will know me in terms of my body clock as such operates on, is this kind of concept of circadian rhythms, which is, you know, a whole fascinating in its own right, in terms of essentially it's the pattern in which you live from a clock a day, a month, the way you eat, the way you sleep, and all of that. And I think that this is really, really important, because I think traditionally there's a setting where you're expected to fit within a boundary of 9 to 5:30, and it's no different with education in schools. You shove 30 kids in a room, and between that time and that time, they're all going to be as effective as each other. And I think what's really highlighted in this is that, as those that know me know, I wake up incredibly early. So it's gone from 4:45, which it used to be, to now 3:50, absolutely on the nose every day. So I've normally had lunch by now, but I'm incredibly productive through that time. So I generally can start at 4 a.m. and I will just plow through it. But come 3:30, 4 o'clock, I'm like, that's me. And I'm like, I need a break at that point, because it's kind of natural for the work. You've probably put in a 10-hour shift, and there you are. However, within the office, you know, there's also people that will walk through the door at 9:50. And one of the challenges, again, being very, very open, that I have, is that as a manager, you feel that you have to set the right example. So if my dream would be to go right at 4 o'clock every day, a couple of hours, I'm going to bit of downtime, and then I'm back onto emails and everything later on. But you feel incredibly guilty for not being there. And then inevitably, so there's a group of us that will be in the office for kind of 7:15, 7:30. But quite often I'll end up there till 6 o'clock at night, because I feel I need to be there to be a face, which is actually really, really unhealthy when you look at it. But I think the purpose of where we're leading to on this is that, actually, having now seen the patterns that people work to and how effective they are in it, is that when we do come back in the shape or form that we do, is that we'll actually tailor individual patterns around people's best working practices. However, they will then have the autonomy, but the accountability for their productivity, to ensure that that's working effectively within the marketplaces that we are. But I think that is something that should definitely be taken as an advantage. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's it's an insane historical reason that we all work 9 till 5 and all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting that this is giving us the opportunity to look at what rhythms we work to best and where we're most productive. And I'm sure the team appreciate all the emails from me at 6 a.m. Getting up at 6 a.m. and working for 2 hours without anyone disturbing is actually super productive. That's the best part of the day. It's just that when I get to 3 o'clock and I want to go to sleep is the problem. So
yeah, absolutely.
I guess staying on that and looking at it, obviously, whilst there are some positives, there's also lots of challenges and negatives around working remotely. Not least the fact that we are all remote and those sort of social things have dropped away, and all the serendipitous conversations that you would have been able to have. What sort of impact have you seen with that with your team? Are there things that you've done that have been effective to mitigate some of that?
Yeah, I think and I'm sure everybody feels the same on this. I think you can get together in this and, online and do it, but there's a real missing what I would class as that real sense of community, from the face-to-face point of view, from I think the lighter stuff, I think the humour interaction and the on-tap support, and I think the kind of the laughter and the fun part of it as much as anything. You really do miss the people that you're just sat having a bit of banter with all day, every day. I think interesting, coming back to the BCorp side, so the way that we measure our BCorp is in 3 core areas, which is internal community, external community, and environment. And then so from an internal community point of view, we have an internal stakeholder group, which is voluntary, which we have generally about 16 people involved in, who all focus on different areas. And that we all get together once a month, set objectives, go away, come back, and you just miss what's driven through that in terms of, and it could be, Friday afternoon lunches, or we were just about to create a running club, which was a 1K, a 2K, a 5K, and a 10K, so everyone could be included in, and all these kind of things. And it's just really difficult when you can't, and at the moment, your emotions are up and down. You have, it was described to me, which I think is really good. You have kind of forward days and backward days, and just to be able to check in with somebody is really, really difficult. And also from us, because we're having really difficult conversations around, furlough, and why one person, not another person. You can't express your the same as you would, and ensure that actually when you click leave, that they still feel like what they've said is right, and that there might be other people checking in with them, and you have that sense of responsibility, which just doesn't come across. So that's really, really difficult. What we have done is, though, that we do regular check-ins. We've set milestones for people on furlough, in terms of when we expect to update, and everybody comes onto, or we invite everybody onto, I think a lot of businesses are doing this on a Friday kind of Zoom call at the end of the day, which is when we tend to do a roundup of the week. We don't do kind of who's done amazing, who's done this, who's done that. We talk as a blanket that everybody is really contributing. I mean, they really have been incredible. I think something I've really pushed across is that actually I think it's as hard being on furlough to many people as it is somebody absolutely busting themselves trying to get us by. It's just a different responsibility, which they've taken on board and accepted and been really, really strong about, which is keen to get across. We've done the usual things. We've done a quiz. I can recommend, we did a Through the Keyhole on Friday, which was brilliant, which I recommend to anybody, which is amazing. So yeah, we're staying in touch and we're doing, but I think it's limited to get the true sense of what you're doing. And people are even saying to me, like someone said to me yesterday, do you know when we're coming back in the office? And I'm like, well, I'm not Boris, but it's an educated guess. But I hope we'll have something sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, we just got to keep getting by.
Yeah. And there is a really difficult thing for a lot of our community, many of whom are entrepreneurs and leaders in their own businesses, of those types of questions where you're not cited on information any more than anyone else is. So you've got to try and stay positive, and there's a mental health impact on you and other leaders whilst you're trying to help your team. So there is a really important thing that we just need to keep front and center as we go through the next however long this may be. Speaking of which, if we start to think about some of the long-term impacts on business and what you think they might be, how do you think things will change? Do you think hiring is going to change going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with kind of friends and clients which are relevant. I think there's a couple of things specifically on hiring which are positive, which is one, I had a conversation with somebody that works in a kind of events publishing organization the other day, And they just said the beauty this has taught me is that I'm going to need an editor soon, and I now don't need to look in Bristol. I've got the whole country to look in because I don't need them to be sat in the office. And I've never considered that before. So I do think, especially in hard to find markets, tech, data, and so forth, I think I think you've got to find a balance. It's okay to go and hire people very, very remotely, but you do need to have that community aspect as well. But, you know, whether it's Swindon, Oxford, whatever, you know, if you're having somebody in a day a week and it's a reasonable commute for that amount of time, then I think there's a balance where people can open up their talent pools. And I think that is something people will be much more open to. I think the other one is, actually, Sabrina flagged it the other day, actually, which is we did something around the 2030 future of work report not so long ago, which is very focused on, as they class it, the gig economy.
Yeah.
And something that has actually been presented a couple of times is that I think, again, particularly within tech data, is whether people will then lean towards more contract, short-term, project-based employees, as opposed to taking on full-time employees to the same extent, because of office space. And I think there is an interesting point in that in terms of vulnerability if this situation arises. And secondly, that it gives much more flexibility in terms of ownership of those employees and how you build that project cost from the outset. So it's cited that will move forward in time off the back of this, which again, I think, will come back into the size of innovation and transformation and projects which kick in as well. So I think they're the two from the hiring side. I think from the physical workspace side, going back into what we just said, like we were considering taking the space next to us, which would get about another 30 people in, and there's no way on earth we'd do that now. Because one, vulnerability, because the leases are too long. You've still got to pay the rent, whatever, unless you go under. It's going to have to be paid at some point, and rightfully so, because landlords are a business. But secondly, because we've got a model now where if we needed to go up by 15, 20 people, then we'll work a rota system for the office, because it's proven we can make it work. So I think from that side, it's impacted. Going back into the workspace, we work in the Midlands, and something they'd sent us through, which was interesting because they'd taken, naturally, as an organisation of that size, they'd taken a lot of consultancy, and the three core areas which they believe that we need to look at returning to the office whenever that might will be the three things. The first is sanitisation, which is both within our own office environments, but from communal point of view as well. Really clear signposting on social distancing, on what the rules and regulations are, and then the physical distancing itself between kind of desk space and that. And that could be really, really difficult for people that were at capacity. So that was the other big one. I think the big opportunity we've got, which turns to the tech talent side, is reskilling. There will be a lot more people on the market. I think the West Midlands, I'd love to talk about this in a WECA point of view. Hopefully there'll be some communication there, because I think there's so much that could be taken, because, you know, saw the course and trainings on it, and I think it's vital. So this work with tech talent at the moment, this project, we've got 200, so this is grant funded, so these are free spaces for academies, 120 on data engineering, 80 on full stack. The end employers are in place already, so this is all generated by West Midlands Combined Authority, which are typically large-scale organisations where they procure the training, the positions are there, and it would feed through. Now, at the moment, the positions are obviously on hold, but the training continues. So we've been running that for 2 weeks. Now, at the moment, we've had 100 applications a week. This is women only, or non-binary, who are interested in learning kind of, like I say, full stack or data engineering. It's a massive, massive opportunity to retrain people. First of all, in terms of getting people who might have fallen out of other areas, be it retail, hospitality, whatever they might be, but they need a career pathway into areas where there is a significant shortage, which is tech, data, etc. Secondly, having seen, come right back to the start, the working patterns around work from home, flexible working, the way hours are made up, lends itself incredibly to a more diverse workforce. Yes, I know diversity is a very big topic, but where we're focused here, because that money from the grant was given to us specifically for gender. A majority within that want to be working mums. That's a massive opportunity there to embrace that diversity, which is going to fuel those businesses forward. And that's something that should be really taken on board at this moment in time, because it's an opportunity.
And are those people being trained remotely at the moment and part-time? And I know Tech Talent Academy has particular focus around widening the talent pool. So it'd be really interesting to understand a bit of that as well.
Yeah, so it is. So we've adapted. So again, thankfully, because we're so new, we've only been running since kind of September last year. We've been able to flip the model very, very quickly. So yes, we were blended learning before, but we've moved completely online now. What's been absolutely amazing with Tech Talent is like I say, its purpose is to train 20,000 people from diverse backgrounds, and we will do that. But I went out on the recruitment campaign for trainers, community managers. Like I say, we've got 11 people now, and it was the easiest recruitment I've ever done in my life, because I could literally target exactly the audience that I wanted to, which were trainers, which are notoriously hard to find, ICT trainers within education, who are our profile of people that we want in the organisation. In that whole business, there's out of 11, there's 2 white males, and the authenticity from the people involved in it is incredible, but their experiences. So whilst they've been going since September, the knowledge in that team is 30, 40 years worth. So they've flipped it around considerably and can now scale it, knowing our attraction model is so strong to get that experience in, even what we're doing there. So yeah, it's working incredibly well.
And that sort of, obviously not the academy on its own, but the wider piece of increasing diversity into data science is really, something that's come out and been really apparent throughout this process, is the disproportionate impact that Corona has had on different communities, and communities where we haven't prepared things for. So whether that is that PPE equipment doesn't fit people, or people from a BME background are more likely to be affected by the disease because of the positions that they're in. So that sort of more holistic piece of how you can diversify data science and how that will then have an impact is something I think is so key going forward.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point on that though is the grant funding, because you won't get, if you're, and there are various models, I know there are, and grant funding isn't readily available, which I also get, but if something isn't accessible community, then it's inaccessible. If it is only accessible to, even if it's we're talking gender here, even if it's female, even if it's majority white female with privileged background that can afford 4, 8, 10K to pay for a course, then that's one thing. But you can really reach into very, very deep communities if something is grant funded, and then an employer is paying that back to the provider on top as well, which creates the business model. So, and that's where I think West Midlands Combined Authority are doing a really incredible job. They put 5 million into this specifically to tackle the challenge, and I just think it's great to have that kind of backing.
Yeah, well, and I know it's something that the West of England, as part of the recovery task force, are looking at all sorts of different models, and it's certainly something that I've gone about to them several times, because I think if you do want to reach those communities and you really want to diversify the talent pool, that is really the only way that you're going to be able to do it in the short term. So
yeah,
it's super
absolutely.
Also, in terms of long-term stuff, and I guess we've touched on this a bit, but it'd be thinking about culture and management systems. Do you think all that's going to change as well? Because if people are working remotely, if they're not necessarily a team that are coming into the office all together at the same time, what sort of impact do you think that'll have?
Yeah, I think it will. I think that the more difficult thing is, I think the people that are currently working will be okay with it, because they're used to it. I think the bigger challenge is the furloughed people. So if you consider that, I think again a generalist statement, but if you take our instance, we're working on a 30% model at the moment, so we've got 60% furloughed. If we consider that they may be furloughed till September, I'm kind of making an assumption, but let's say it goes that far down the line, and then were to come back into the business, that person probably would have been furloughed from March to September. So first of all, from a mental health point of view, it's just going to be who knows where they'll be. They could also be sat by somebody who's been absolutely busting themselves for the same amount of time, who equally might be struggling in many ways from a mental health and exhaustion point of view, because people are putting so much in to get by. But they also have lived very, very different lives, and they're kind of fairly incomparable to sit down and just crack on with. So I think there needs to be real consideration how people come back into the workplace. Again, I spoke to somebody the other day that's putting a survey out on that, to kind of gather in the actual thoughts from people, both furloughed, non-furloughed, how this can work, and try and rebuild those systems. But I think from the working systems, I think if they work, they shouldn't change. Why? And I think we'll come back to in terms of whether this is here to stay or it isn't here to stay. But I think that depends on the management team, the leadership team, in terms of maintaining what is working and tweaking what doesn't, that they stay fit for purpose.
Yeah, and then that sort of ongoing focus on, I think mental health as a focus had very much moved up the agenda in the last few years, but this is something that's brought it to the fore for lots of other people, and I think has made it really clear that it's an absolutely key issue alongside any other health issue. Yeah, I guess, so you've referred to it, but what is your feeling on whether is this a blip? Is this going to be a permanent change? Where are you on that spectrum?
We'll have permanent change, but then that's because I'm confident in the way that we constantly are adapting anyway. I think there's two concerns are that, well, obviously it depends on the leadership and management team. If I talk about our sector, there are a few businesses which have pretty much furloughed 95% of their people on day one furlough came out. And I can't speak for them, but you kind of have a sense of it's going to be like, right, everyone back in, sit down, where's your headset, crack on. And you're like, not sure, you're kind of thinking about what you might be walking back into here, because it's not going to be that. And I think the other way of considering it is kind of what I'd class as the New Year's syndrome, which is, this is amazing, this is amazing, this is amazing, which is, and if you look at the LinkedIn content at the moment, it's all, this is going to change, this is going to change the environment safe, it's all amazing. And then in 6 months, 9 months time, everyone will look back and go, oh, that was a bit weird, wasn't it? And then they're just back to their old ways because it's so easy just to fall back into those ways. So I think it will take a really strong leadership and management team to implement and ensure that the best of it remains, and it's utilised to an advantage. Equally, when new people come into the business, because you'll have a team of people now that will get you through this. And as new people come in after this, it's going to feel quite strange because I think the people within the organisations at the moment are very, very close. And there's a real sense of pulling together. And that will be fascinating to see how that plays out. I think so something that we're going to do, which again, I've seen a few people citing as well, is we're going to do a task either next week or the week after, which is where we will review what we are right now and future. Personal level, I don't mind saying that I've updated my purpose as such, which reflects into the team. I think what you've seen within the team is, you knew that the team was really loyal and proud of the business and proud of themselves and everything, but this is definitely, and I was always very much, it is our thing, kind of verbally, not on paper, but having seen the way so many people have responded, we've not, I don't mind saying it, it can be a public thing. It's like, we've no big end game, no big sale. We're not going to sell to a recruitment group. It'd be horrific, absolutely horrific. It is an employee thing. And actually, when you've seen the way that people respond out of it, is that we will restructure with a purpose,
Yeah.
that is winning for this for the long term, and they have a long-term vested interest in it to be what they want it to be. We don't have to be the biggest, and we don't have to be this, and we don't have to be that. We've just got to be, we've got to balance the profit and purpose, as we say with B Corp. But if it's enjoyable and we are ultimately doing the best that we can, and that's what we measure our success on, then that's incredible, and it should be a long-term thing. So I think we will reevaluate our purpose, but also our behaviours and our values, because I think we've learned a lot through it, but that is down to the incredible people that we've had, and what they've really shown through this.
Yeah, and it'd be good if you could quickly give a quick summary of B Corp. I don't know if everybody knows what B Corp is. I think it's a really interesting area that's absolutely going to grow in the future, and the fact that you're doing it as a recruitment business, which isn't necessarily always renowned for the type of focus that B Corps talk about, is quite an interesting area.
Yeah, so B Corp is global movement in terms of, and effectively the line is that you balance profit and purpose, and to a large extent B Corp wants you to be profitable, because the more that you're profitable, the more that you will invest into the people that you have and the organizations that you might support. So if you look from a tech talent point of view, that's very, very easy, because our line is we're going to train 20,000 people from diverse backgrounds. It's got a very, very clear purpose in terms of how we would be supporting certain demographics. ADLIB, from ADLIB's point of view, we've always supported social enterprise, looked at the way that we invest time outside of core recruitment activity. So effectively what we've done is, like I said earlier, we focus into the three core areas: the internal community, which we've talked about, to make that beyond coming to work. Secondly, the external community, which we have a number of initiatives on. Mike's team has set up Green Tech Southwest. We've got Head in the Cloud, which is a meetup. We do work with Babasa, lots of social enterprise organisations, and that might be helping kids with career paths or people with CV support or whatever they might be. And then the third aspect of it generally is the environment and where we get to. And actually, we were on that. We were just literally about to tip that we'd be carbon neutral. I can hands down say we are at this minute in time carbon neutral from a business point of view. Working from home, so that's one tick. But actually, when you put it all together, it all is the package up as to how you pull that, and it varies very much from business to businesses, because a lot of them, like I say, with tech talent, Bucker Herbs is a great example. If you consider them, they have a supply chain, they have farmers, they have people who they have responsibilities to, as to how they might procure and how that system works. We are much more service driven, so it's really about what we do back in the community as much as anything.
Yeah, and I think it's really aligned with where we're all going to be in the future. I know a big focus for Marvin in Bristol particularly is how we make sure that whatever the recovery looks like, it's aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think, B Corps in many ways are that sort of business version of the Sustainable Development Goals and how they're going to impact on it. So it's great that all those things are sort of broadly pointed in the same direction. I have a final question for you, and then I think we have a couple of questions from the audience, but if people want to add more in, I have two questions, but I'm going to combine them because I know we're running low on time. It'd be great to understand where you think the tech sector is going to be coming out of this, and particularly in Bristol and Bath, what you think makes the tech community here different?
Yeah. So I think on the first one, and I think you might be watching, but Charlie from Solve the Board, who I saw was featured yesterday, actually, has set up a really good, putting this out publicly now, but I don't know if he wants me to, a kind of innovation kind of group who talk on a Thursday afternoon, which we are later. And I think something that's really shone through from that is, talk about kind of the pace at which innovation will change. That group has really cited a couple of examples where innovation might be considered, and innovation being not just from a tech point of view, but also say from a transformation point of view, financial services, retail, but actually there's an opportunity, what's happening at the moment, to go, actually, do we need to wait that 2 years? because our customers are now used to operating online. Why send it back to how it was? Let's just cut all of that out and get straight to what we wanted to get to anyway and take the opportunity. So I think there'll be a real fascination as to how much of that actually transpires, rather than people falling back into the norm. Again, I might have people might not disagree with that. Do you feel like there may have needed a bit of alignment anyway, in terms of, again, the phrase, was it too easy? Nothing's easy, I know that, but actually just to get up and running and start something that might not be a viable business model from the outset, rather than creating a really cool product or whatever it might be, whether that gets challenged a bit more. We do kind of a strong content series on product purpose and potential. And I think if people are considering that from their business from the outset, as opposed to just having something that looks pretty good or cool tool that gets invested into, a little bit like the original .com boom, that actually might just kickstart the market again with a bit more thought behind it to where we were potentially going. And then finally on your, the question on the community standout, I think it's just much more around the supply chain. You put it very, very delicately there, that we're a recruitment business, and if we're brutally honest, we're fairly low in the supply chain to a lot of people, not to everyone. We have a lot of friends as well, but we have had some really, really incredible messages of support. Like, we don't want to be bombarding people now. We don't, it's not a time to sell hard and all the things which you'll have read about, but we had a client in the region. It just sent us a note saying, like, we're really thinking of you right now. This is our message from our CEO. We've got to get behind people like this. We've got to pay them. When we can use you, we will, and blah, blah, blah. And we've had several of those messages, and it's fairly consistent. And I think that just goes to show that it comes back to that. It is a community. And it's just been quite, kind of, I don't know if humbling is the right phrase, but just really warm, to where we sit within it, and that we're accepted within it beyond being the recruitment thing, and that we do play that kind of greater role as well, hopefully.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. And I think it's I've noticed this a couple of times, we sort of all take that community for granted. And I think the last 6 or 7 weeks have really started to bring some of that out. I've had lots of emails from people saying, including you, saying, how's it going? Shall we catch up? How can we all help one another? And I think that's, because it's a time of adversity, we are coming together in a way that we probably weren't 6 months ago. And that's one of the things I hope we do absolutely take back out of this. And we're all aware that we're one big community, because that's something we could forget. So we have a couple of questions here from different people. And then after that, we will go into networking. So there's a couple of practical questions, I guess. So we've been asked, with the teams that have been furloughed and the people that have been furloughed, have you seen, or are you offering specific support and tips, and what would they be? Because obviously we've talked a lot about the health and mental health impacts of people on furlough. So are there things that you've seen out there that can help?
So we've done, when we put a pack together, well, not a pack, we put a PDF together, which kind of explained exactly what furlough was, why it was happening, gave more background to it. We put links to resources from the mental health point of view. We did encourage volunteering. If I was furloughed now and I wasn't trying to sort 3 businesses out, I genuinely would be volunteering, because I think that would be a really good use of my time. I think it is. It's just, as much as anything, though, it's staying in touch and communicating what's going on and reassuring. But also, you can't over reassure, because the market is what the market is, and so you've got to tread a very, very delicate line with updating and being practical. And our Friday catch-ups always start with the line, "Not a huge amount's changed," but that's more positive.
Yeah.
It's just a reality of where we are, and we just have to keep feeding through what's happening and what's happening in the business. So I think you just need to be there as much as anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Referring back to right at the beginning of our conversation, you talked a bit about having some more time through not commuting and through less meetings. Hopefully some people are getting to have less meetings. It doesn't feel like that's quite filtered down to me. I wish it had. How do you make sure that the business as usual and the certainly at the moment the focus on us all trying to be productive and keep going doesn't encroach on the time that you might have carved out to think and reflect?
Yeah, so I mean, we had this specific conversation, which was, and again, I think it's where it comes from. This was specifically as that example I gave earlier, which is we don't know, the model won't look like what it was before, neither in a positive or a negative way that we know at this minute in time. But because we have managers effectively being very, very hands-on, what they've got is first-hand knowledge and information and client messages about what's happening in the market. And if you don't take the time out to reflect that into almost weekly, we could sit and look at, how models might change or sectors might be tweaked or whatever they might be. But you're almost running a constant dialogue. And my message to them was, I think really you need a good half hour a day where you are just sat reflecting, because we are really, really up against the wall with it at the moment. And you can feel like, firefighting, and you can firefight and get nowhere. It's literally, it can be really, really brutal. What used to feel like every day is now just a celebration, as if just on a different scale. So it's really, I think that's the way that we've positioned it. But equally as well, now I think now we're all coming to grips with in the next phase of where we're heading to. It's not that we do have regular kind of manager catch-ups and so forth in terms of where we are financially and what we're doing. But as I said, around that task, around what we were, what we are, what we're going to be, I think those need introducing more into our weeklies. And not to get too deep and strategic in terms of where we're going, but I think you need ongoing dialogue with it. But you have to push people into that rather than feeling I might be productive doing this, because they have to see the long term as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And then a final question, and then we'll get people to go across to the networking. This is an interesting one from Charlie. Do you think the power in recruitment is going to shift to the employee? Are people going to choose to work for organisations that share their values and purpose?
I think it had already, or was on its way. Depends on the market. And again, this is something that we do a lot of with kind of clients. I think it was really interesting because we were doing some work with Set Squared recently on introduction to recruitment, and within that you're talking about benefits, which was a really great thing. How people make a decision between how you engage them, how you take them through a journey, and how you visualize it. And the conversations that we used to have 10 years ago in recruitment used to be, what's the benefit package? Can I work at a big organization that has all this holiday and all this and all this? And I was explaining that even when you look at benefits, some clients will say, when we say, what are the benefits? They're like, oh, I haven't really thought about that. I don't know, 20 days holiday, 25 days holiday, something like that. And I think we do a bit of pension. And you're like, well, let's talk it through. And I was like, well, look, here's our benefits. And we've got 3 pages of benefits. And none of them are particularly financial. And that's not to say that you're making them up on the spot, but they really spell out all of the benefits of why you would join an organization. But those are the companies that the employees want to join, because they can see, again, the community, the family part of it, the fairness, the for good, all of those are far, far greater necessary than remuneration. I think it was moving towards that way, but I think it will increasingly after this.
Yeah, sorry, as he seems to do every week, my dad's just calling me. It's like he sets the time for when. Sorry, so I missed the very last part of that because I was trying to make sure my computer didn't crash. I'm sure it was brilliant.
It was.
I think we'll wrap it up there, but thank you so much for your time today, Nick. It was really interesting. For the people in the audience, we have the networking that's starting at the moment. So on the left hand of your screen, you should see a little logo that says networking. please do head across to there. The event's open for another hour. You can do, I think it's set to 240 seconds of networking before it kicks you out. So 4 minutes to have a chat, and I will see you again next week. Next week we have a session, hopefully, although she's feeling a bit ill at the moment, with Joyanne Boyce. Joy is going to talk to us about social media in the new normal. So how you develop and show social media has changed quite a lot. So it should be a really interesting conversation. But a final thanks to Nick, and a final thanks to our partners that enable all this to happen. And I will see you all soon. Thanks.